Everybody. This is Marjorie Kirby with the Office of Environmental Management. With me here today from Office of Environmental Management, we have Victor Mucharusa, Javier Pagan, Pete McGilvray. We also have Imran Ghani and Swan Liu from Osiris 9 here to walk us through this project schedule template and PSM code webinar. And a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We can view who is participating through the webinar today, and we ask that if you have more than one person with you participating, if you could please type your names in the chat box so we can get a full picture of who's on today. Also wanted to let you know that we are recording this webinar. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat box. We are monitoring your questions in live time and can periodically pause to provide answers to your questions. For purposes of introduction in the agenda, today, wanted to give you a little bit of background on why we are talking about PSM schedules. A little bit also where we've been, where we are, and where we're going as part of the introduction. You may recall over the past 4, 5, 6, 7 years even, Office of Environmental Management has periodically circulated a spreadsheet to our project development environment offices and asked to fill out some critical project environmental review milestones and schedules for to be completed on ongoing PD&Es. This was a pretty labor-intensive exercise with a short shelf life. However, we needed the information. It helped us to stay informed about the projects that were active and ongoing. It helped us respond to inquiries from management, agencies, FHWA division, and you yourselves, the districts, kind of kept us in the loop. It helped us collect and respond to performance data and reporting requests. For example, FHWA would annually ask us for the time frame, how long it was taking us to complete each of the various classes of action. It helped us monitor our own successes and anticipate EAs and EIS review periods that we would need to complete from this office. It also aided in understanding potential impacts of new requirements or new issues on emerging issues on pipeline projects. So in addition to having this information at hand, we saw that within FDOT, the state of Florida, as well as the national front, a huge emphasis on streamlining the project development process and efforts to shorten the NEPA phase to accelerate project delivery. And that's been reflected in transportation authorizations from Safety Loop Map 21 and again in FAST. Part of this is connecting the dots between planning, PD&E, and design, and shortening the overall pre-construction schedule. To accomplish this, we need early schedule development and an understanding in the direction of each project and realistic project scheduling. In order to facilitate this information gathering, we developed PSM codes to relate to our project schedules in the environmental review process. We had some in existence, but we needed a consistent and complete suite to really hit the critical milestones in PD&E project delivery. And we've also encouraged the use of these PSM codes. We've worked with the production management office, the districts, our environmental project development staff in getting this done. So they are existing, and we've asked that they be used to help support the SWOT approach, for example, and the tracking of what an initial suite of state-funded only projects, and in the future as well on federal projects, federal PD&Es. Part of our questions and responses from you was to develop a template for how and when to apply these codes. So that's what this webinar is essentially about. OSIRIS-9 has been assisting us in developing the schedule template, including the successors and predecessors to the various activity milestones in each environmental review process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Imran Ghani. He'll take on the rest of this webinar. Imran is a planning and PD&E consultant with almost 20 years of experience. Before starting his own firm, he worked for DOT for 13 years, where he served as a PD&E project manager in District 2 and as a project development engineer and ETDM coordinator for Florida's Turnpike. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Imran. Thank you.
Thank you, Marjorie. Today's webinar will cover PSM codes and how they relate to project management, the changes to the PSM code that Marjorie talked about, and then we'll do a live demonstration of some of the schedule templates that we have developed. Before we talk about the schedules, I'm going to take a step back and begin with the basics. What are PSM codes and why are they important? PSM stands for Project Schedule and Management Codes. FDOT uses a software called Primavera to track the different activities that make up the project. For example, this slide shows you the schedule for the State Road 997 or Chrome Avenue PD&E study, and as you can see, it is composed of 7 activities. The final activity, Location Design Approval, was assigned a PSM code of 263 and was completed on November 9, 2006. So why are PSM codes important? PSM codes can assist with project management. A PD&E study may consist of hundreds of activities, but only the major activities are assigned a PSM code. So a quick glance at the schedule can help identify the major milestones within the study. But the most important attribute is that you can develop relationships between the different activities assigned a PSM code. The picture shows you a schedule from District 7. In this scenario, notice to proceed was April 2017, and the final SEER approval is expected to occur between January 11 to February 2nd, 2018. In this example, if right-of-way cost estimates are delayed by 60 days, then the FDOT review of SEER cannot begin on time, and all the subsequent activities will be delayed by 60 days. This lets the project manager know that if they want to maintain the SEER approval date, they must make up the 60 days on future activities. So the next question is, why are we talking about PSM codes, and why are you attending this webinar on PSM codes in November of 2016? The main reason is that FDOT management has decided that environmental work will now be part of the track production schedule. And by environmental work, I'm referring to PD&E activities and also to pre-PD&E activities. As part of this effort, FDOT will be developing a dashboard for state-funded and federally funded projects. This slide shows a snapshot of the state-funded project dashboard. These dashboards will track how each project is progressing and will be reviewed by FDOT Executive Board each month. The dashboard pulls major milestones from the schedule to populate the field, and in this particular example, you can see that major milestones like public hearing and SEER approval have an identified PSM code. These dashboards show when a certain activity is on time, behind schedule by 2 weeks, or behind schedule by more than 2 weeks. For this concept to work, first we need well-defined beginning and ending milestones. To illustrate this point, I'll use an environmental impact statement as an example. An environmental impact statement, or an EIS, begins when the notice of intent to prepare an EIS is published in the Federal Register and ends when the record of decision is signed by the lead agency. So here we have a very well-defined starting and ending point. But what is the starting point for a Type 2 categorical exclusion, SEER, or an environmental assessment? Many project managers use notice to proceed in their schedule as the starting point. However, the notice to proceed is a contractual code. For example, you can receive a notice to proceed in January of 2016 in preparing an EIS, but not issue a notice of intent to prepare an EIS until June of 2017. So to clarify this situation and make sure that you are not penalized on the dashboard, OEM staff has added PSM codes for Type 2 start, SEER start, and environmental assessment start. In updating these PSM codes, the OEM staff did a comprehensive review of needed codes to track PD&E activities. They also included PSM codes for pre-PD&E activities, including SWOT and ETDM. In reviewing these schedules across the state, one major item that became apparent is that every district has realized that existing PSM codes for environmental work are not adequate and have added a number of activities to fully track PD&E studies. Unfortunately, each district assigned different codes to the same activity. For example, FDOT Review of Cultural Resource Assessment Survey is assigned a PSM code of 950 in District 5 and a PSM code of 803 in District 7. On the other hand, the PSM code for public hearing has been established for a long time, and every district is using the PSM code 262 to represent this activity. But whenever a district added new activities, we do not have consistent PSM codes. This update that Marjorie talked about will bring consistency across the state. In addition to adding new PSM codes, we've also established a data dictionary for each code. We are limited on the number of characters we can use in the field activity description, and therefore we have to use abbreviations. For example, ETDM/ETAD prog dot screen start means the ETDM programming screen is submitted to ETAD for a 40-day review. Secondly, sometimes it may be unclear on what exactly is the activity referring to. An example is PSM code 701 and 702. 701 refers to ETDM preliminary summary report published date, while code 702 refers to ETDM final summary report published date. What is the difference between the preliminary and final report in this context? To help answer that question, we have added a description field that explains that preliminary report date is when you have responded to all the ETAD comments and published a report. There are situations in which the class of action may not be clear on this date. The final summary report published date is when you have assigned a class of action and it has been accepted by the lead agency. This update to PSM codes will not affect current and past projects. As you saw in the previous slides, many districts are already using their own version of PSM codes for environmental work, and we are not proposing on deactivating any of these codes. What is being recommended is that all districts switch to the new 700 series for PSM codes. The 700 series is now officially reserved for environmental work. Please do not use them for any other purpose. With consistent codes, the OEM office will now be able to provide better support to all the districts. The introduction of these codes will also help support NEPA assignment. As you know, FHWA will be auditing FDOT for the next 4 years. With the introduction of these PSM codes, it is very possible that many of their questions on study durations and timing can be answered by running a query in central office rather than sending multiple requests to each district. The use of PSM codes and schedules is good project management practice and will help develop realistic schedules. Project managers should review each activity to make sure the duration is realistic. While we're adding new PSM codes, there's nothing new in the concept of developing schedule. Almost every project manager today working on a PD&E study has a schedule that begins with a notice to proceed and ends very close to location, design, concept, acceptance. What is new is that the PD&E PSM codes now cover activities starting from either the SWOT planning or the SWOT strategy meeting all the way to consultant selection. Previously, you could delegate the responsibility of maintaining the project schedule to your PD&E consultant. But now there are activities associated with a project that precede the selection of a consultant. So you will have to develop a mechanism in your office on who will be responsible for tracking activities from the SWOT planning or the SWOT strategy meeting all the way to consultant selection. So let's take a closer look at the activities represented by the blue arrow. The activities begin with either the SWOT planning or the SWOT strategy meeting. Once the project is selected, it is run through ETDM and the programming screen published. A project manager is then assigned. A year before the selection of the PD&E consultant, the SWOT kickoff meeting is held, and you may choose to prepare a traffic forecast and perhaps analysis for the project. You can also issue an advance notification package if one was not prepared with the ETDM programming screen, and use the ETDM comments, traffic analysis to write your PD&E scope. Once the scope is complete, you can begin the procurement process. We have allowed 180 days, almost 6 months, for procurement in our schedule. The activities that take place after the SWOT meeting and before the PD&E selection are now referred to as pre-PD&E activities. We have shown traffic analysis as an example, but there are a number of other activities depending on the project that can take place during this time. So far, we have talked about schedules and pre-PD&E activities in very abstract terms. As part of this effort, we have developed new schedule templates that implement this discussion in a realistic schedule. We now have every schedule beginning with a SWOT planning kickoff meeting, includes pre-PD&E activities, procurement, and then the full PD&E study. We have developed schedule templates for every class of action, including Type 2 categorical exclusion, SEER, environmental assessment, and environmental impact statement. We've also developed templates for overlapping design with Type 2 categorical exclusion and SEER. By early next week, we will be providing these templates to the districts for review. The idea here is that we want to help you understand the process and the relationship between the different activities. Having said that, there is no one template that can cover every unique characteristics of a PD&E study. So feel free to modify these templates to suit your project scope and unique characteristics. Also, feel free to modify them to include district preferences. For example, I used to work at Florida's Turnpike, and all our traffic forecasting was prepared by our traffic and revenue consultant, and the no-bill traffic and analysis was prepared before the PD&E consultant was selected. So if you have certain district preferences, feel free to add them to the schedule. The one thing that we do ask is that you do not delete any applicable activities that have a PSM code. So there is a PSM code 706 for a Type 2 CE start. Please do not delete this PSM code and decide that you will use notice to proceed activity as a substitute activity for a Type 2 CE start. So in summary, I want you to take away 4 items from this webinar. Item number 1, FDOT management has decided that PD&E and pre-PD&E activities will now be part of the track production schedule. Item number 2, to accomplish this, new PSM codes have been added, and now the 700 series is reserved for environmental work. Item number 3, that environmental work now includes PD&E activities and pre-PD&E activities. Therefore, the responsibility of tracking the project activity now begins at least a year before consultant selection. Item number 4 is communication. I cannot stress the importance of communication between the project manager and the scheduler. For this process to succeed, you will need to meet with your schedulers on a monthly basis to discuss any changes in the project schedule. We're going to take some questions if you have any, and if not, we're going to go to a live demonstration of a schedule template that we have developed.
So at the moment, Imran, we don't have any questions, but folks are certainly encouraged that if you have questions, please type them into the chat, and then we can answer them before we go on to the live demo. If nothing starts showing up, then as Imran said, we'll just go into the live demo, and then we'll follow up with questions again after. One question that did come in is, are the templates in Microsoft Word or Primavera? So maybe talk about the templates that are going to be provided.
The templates will be provided in Primavera. The demonstration that we're doing right now is using Microsoft Project. It's a little bit easier to do the demonstration in Microsoft Project than Primavera, so that's the reason we're using this for just this webinar. But DOT's project management tool, schedule management tool is Primavera. All these templates will be provided in Primavera.
Okay, second question just came in, Imran. Will successors and predecessors be supplied for each scheduled activity in the new templates?
Absolutely correct. Schedule doesn't make any sense unless you can see what the predecessors and successors are. The whole thing about designing these new templates is, and I'm going to show this in a demo, is that we wanted to relate all these activities. We wanted to make sure that decisions made in the middle of the PD&E, as I mentioned, changes in delay and right-of-way cost estimates. We wanted to develop these relationships so you can see how changes in something like this can impact your production date. For example, if you know if your SEER approval date is so-and-so, but there's a delay in the public hearing, we have defined successors and predecessors for almost every activity, so we can have that relationship.
We have one more question I'm sure a lot of folks are asking about. When will the files be available, supplied to the team?
So early next week, we're going to provide you with all the Primavera files. And we're also going to provide you with a spreadsheet that shows the new PSM codes and the data dictionary that goes along with it. So it will be a spreadsheet. It will show you all the new PSM codes that have been added and the descriptions that we've added to clarify the intent of those PSM codes.
And to also add on to that, we've obviously recorded the session, we have the PowerPoint, and we'll make all of those items accessible in an internet location and provide access to that location where you can get those files. Another question, will the districts be able to adjust the relationships to the specific district preferences?
Absolutely. When we're developing these schedules, there's no way to anticipate all the unique things that will happen in the project, and there's also no way to anticipate all the different district preferences. We know of some, but we don't know of every preferences. So you are free to change those relationships. You are free to add activities. I've seen some of the schedules for District 4. They're actually a lot more detailed than the template that we're providing. So if you feel like that you need more detailed schedules than that, you want to add more activities, feel free to do so. As I mentioned earlier, the only caveat is that the activities that have PSM codes, if they apply to your project, you cannot delete them. You have to use them.
Okay. We've got no other questions, so I think we're ready to go on to the live demo.
Okay. So hopefully what you're seeing on my screen is the template for Type 2 CE. And I'm sure a lot of you have worked on these project schedules, and all this should be very familiar. And basically, what you are used to working with is starting with activity 43 called PD&E study, and begins with a Type 2 CE start, public involvement, preparing for the kickoff meeting, all the engineering analysis tasks, the environmental analysis, and then the final CE Type 2 document approval. The difference between what you are used to seeing and what we have done this time around is our schedules now begin with a SWOT planning meeting. And this is sort of what I mentioned in my presentation, that now we have PSM codes that go all the way to SWOT planning meeting, for SWOT kickoff meeting. These activities are supposed to occur a year before, at least a year before the selection of the consultant. So this is a responsibility that each office will have to decide on how to handle. And so in this schedule, and I go back to the other question that was asked about relationships, and just for demonstrative purposes, I'm going to go ahead and change the date for the assigned project manager so that you can understand what the impact is. Right now, the way the schedule is set up, the location design concept acceptance for this project is January 7th of 2019. So I want you to remember this date, January 7th, 2019. Let's say this project gets delayed initially when it was being assigned to a project manager, and it gets delayed by 1 year. And the entire schedule will now update. The question was, are there predecessors and successors? And as you can see, every activity on this template has been updated, and now the location design concept acceptance, which was January 7th, 2019, has now moved to December 11th, 2019. So it didn't move exactly 1 year because there was some float built in, but it moved almost 1 year because the project was delayed. So that is one of the things that we have made sure that almost every activity has this relationships built in, so that when you make a change, it's carried throughout the schedule. I'm going to undo my change and do a little bit of a demo of another example. Public involvement. We have site review, newsletter. We have our public kickoff meeting, September 5th, 2017. Let's say the newsletter is delayed, and now instead of taking 20 days, it's going to take 30 days. And when I do that, you'll notice the public kickoff meeting, which was September 15th, now got moved to September 29th. So all these relationships have been built, and anytime you make a change or when you enter the actual date, it will tell you what the new location design concept acceptance date is. I'm going to undo it and do another demonstration. Public hearing. We have public for October 26, 2018. Let's say during the presentation display review material that you found something wrong, and now it's going to take a lot longer. And let's say I'm going to change it to 45 days. It will also mean you'll have to re-advertise the project and everything, but I just want to demonstrate what happens to the public hearing date. It's now October 26th. I make that change. It now moves to November 2nd, 2018. The public hearing date moves, so does the location design concept acceptance. It only moves 7 days. It used to be January 7th. It now moved to January 14th because there was some float built into that schedule. Any questions?
There are some questions.
Sure.
One of them is more of one is a suggestion for demos and screenshots. Since the schedulers use Primavera, it would be a little more helpful if we can provide some guidance within that framework as well. That's what they're used to doing. So perhaps as a follow-up, we can put together some sort of handout with some screen captures for these guys in a Primavera template rather than just working from Microsoft Project. So that was one that came in. Another one was, has there been a decision if we assign the PM code every time the PM changes? And Margie, I'll let you get that one.
For purposes of being able to access and identify who the project manager is, it would be certainly recommended to go ahead and update the project manager in the system when that happens.
And then one third question that's out there right now is, will all of the activities have ID sets, or do we need to make our own?
So what happens in Primavera, and this is a little bit different than Microsoft Project, that Primavera uses a 9-digit code. The first 3 digits are the PSM code. And the way it is set up right now, and Pete, you can also add to it, is you're also trying to convert the previous studies that have taken place and to preserve their PSM codes. So the decision now is that the activity has, the first 2 digits have to use the PSM code that is associated with that. The next 6 digits you have to use either all zeros or 0, 1, 0, and then 3 zeros. Anything?
That's right, and that's the standard. So when we're pulling in and looking at activities and we're trying to populate dashboards, we're looking for the 9-digit code. We're looking for the leading 3 to be the PSM code that we're trying to track, followed by all zeros, or followed by a 0, 10,000. All the other IDs are open and available to the district to do what they normally do. When we look at schedule, there's a lot of pre-activities that occur. There's a lot of post-activities that occur. That's really up to the district. But do recognize we are going to be focusing in on the PSM code followed by all zeros, or the PSM code followed by 0, 10,000. And that's because when we did a statewide analysis and got a dump of everybody's schedules, it seemed to be that was a consistent way that folks were kind of identifying that base activity as either that PSM code followed by zeros or 0, 10,000. And by selecting that, it gave us the ability to have the least amount of impact statewide. It looked like 80% of the folks kind of fell into that category. So that's why that was chosen that way.
Just wanted to emphasize the point about the dashboard. You know, the whole point of all this is that the dashboards will use the PSM codes to pull the schedules that you have put in to populate it. So it's very important, for your benefit also, to make sure that what is in the schedule is accurate, the PSM code is accurate, because otherwise it's very possible that the dashboard may be pulling in incorrect information and may look like you are behind schedule. And that dashboard will be reviewed by the executive board every month. So this is one of the schedule templates that we've developed. Another one that we developed is the SEER. Very similar project. The difference here is that the approval at the very end is by FDOT, usually by the districts, rather than the Office of Environmental Management. Same concept. Every activity that is assigned a PSM code is highlighted in yellow, and the PSM code is listed. So it's a one-way quickly help identify which activities now have a PSM code. As you saw in the presentation, previously there were only a few activities. Now we're up to almost 100 PSM codes. So you want to make sure that your schedules include those PSM codes. The other direction that we received from the Office of Environmental Management was there's potential for schedules in which we're overlapping PD&E and design. And this is an example of a SEER with a overlap of design. So very similar schedule until you get to the final SEER approval, and then you go to 60% phase plans, 90% phase, 90% or phase 3 plans, the right-of-way acquisition, the specification package, and then plans to Tallahassee. Obviously, it's not going to cover every unique situation that comes up or the different things that happen in your project, but this is really as a starting point. It helps show you the relationships, helps show you some of the major activities, so that you can use that as a starting point to suit your needs, to suit your district preference needs. Any other questions?
Yeah, there was one that I guess was scrolled off. She said for the screenshot where it says public meeting is code 292, what is the code for the public comment period? So I guess if you go back to the first one you were looking at.
The presentation, or
no? I think it was tied. It was scrolled off the screen, so I think it was in maybe in the previous one.
Yeah. So right now there is no PSM code for public comment period, and actually this might be a good time to actually show you the table. So these are the PSM codes that we have right now. As you can see, they only refer to the major milestones. They don't include every activity that takes place in a PD&E study. So this is really the major milestones in a PD&E study. A lot of them have to do with PD&E start, submitting documents to OEM for approval so we can track how long it takes, final approval, changes in status. A lot of PSM codes deal with EISs, draft EISs to OEM. We kept some of the PSM codes for federal highway because there are still some projects ongoing that are going to need that PSM code where federal highway will still be the lead agency. So you will still see some PSM codes with federal highway in there. We're going through a revision right now as we look through these, and we're going to make this spreadsheet available for your review. As we're going through this review, we're also noticing certain things. We had a PSM code for Federal Register when things are published in the Federal Register, but as you know, for an EIS, a notice of intent is published in the Federal Register. The notice of availability for draft EIS is published in the Federal Register. The notice of availability for a final EIS is published in the Federal Register, and we were thinking that perhaps we need to have different PSM codes for each of those activities. So we're noticing a couple of things. It takes a long time to get the PSM codes approved. We're on revision number, is it 2 or 3?
Right, 4.
Okay, 4. So once that is done, so if you see something in this PSM codes, we'll make them available. If you feel like there's a certain activity that really needs a separate PSM codes, or there are a couple of activities that are falling under the same PSM code and would help to actually separate them, please let Pete McGilvery or Javier Pagan know about these, and we can look at those suggestions. So a lot of this is really things that you've already dealt with. I'm sure most of you know schedules. You understand predecessors, successors, the flow for each of them. Just want to emphasize the big difference is that there is now activities, a number of activities that take place before PD&E. And we also included procurement. We included 120 days for procurement. This is calendar days. It actually equals to 180 to 120 working days equals to 180 calendar days. So when you look at the schedule initially, you'll notice that the project begins in August and ends August 2017 and ends in 2019. It's a 2.5-year schedule. The first thing you say is, why does the Type 2 CE now takes 2.5 years? And the reason is there's almost a year's worth of activities that are included that include all the pre-PD&E activities. So the actual schedule in this template for a Type 2 CE really is from May 2017 all the way to January of 2019. But as I said, you're free to change these. You're free to add more activities, but simply that all these activities that have a PSM code, if they apply to your project, please do not delete them, because it's very possible that queries run by central office or queries run by the dashboard that the executive board will see are going to use this, and you may be penalizing yourself if you don't use these PSM codes.
No additional questions right now?
So, I mean, I can go through these schedules for a very long time. It's stuff that you've already seen. I think it would help if we could give you these templates so you can actually bring them up and look at the activities, look at the predecessors and successors, see if they're adequate. If there are things that you feel are missing, you know, feel free to email the OEM staff. And there's no other questions, I think.
Yeah, we'll sit on here for a minute. So if anybody has some additional questions, we'll stay on. I know everybody was seeing a 2-hour webinar and thinking, man, it's going right into my lunch, and we wanted to reserve more time than we needed. We got done a little faster than what we had anticipated. We were thinking we were probably going to be done around 11. But if you have any questions, go ahead and ask those now, and we'll wait a couple minutes. And otherwise, look for the recording, the PowerPoint, the templates, the data dictionary. Will all be uploaded at an internet accessible location. We'll forward you guys out the links to be able to access them. Let's see, we did get a couple questions. Why are we including pre-PD&E activities? It gives a false reading.
From the standpoint of tracking the overall time it takes to complete a PD&E, with the PS&E code for document or PD&E study start, we'll certainly be able to tease out the actual length of the PD&E study. The idea is to be able to have pre-PD&E activities occur so that we can begin to have begin our PD&E in a very well-informed manner, time other activities that lead up to the start of the PD&E and say the PD&E scope of services development in an organized fashion. For example, running ETDM screening pre-PD&E. These are PSM codes, and they help to trigger and map out or strategize those things that ultimately inform a PD&E study and help it to be accomplished in an efficient way.
From a federal standpoint, this is Javier, you also have planning and environmental linkages that have to be recognized. So this allows us to do that. So recognizing them in the schedule lets us see them without bothering you guys, so we know if an action has to be taken. Particularly as we move into NEPA assignment, this will become even more important on major projects so that we can get these adoptions taken care of at an early point in time. So we have to have them documented. And as to the false reading specifically, we were actually trying to correct that. In previous years, Type 2s and environmental assessment in particular had, quite frankly, bogus start dates. They would have NTP start dates for contracts and things like that. That's not when your PD&E actually started. So you would have PD&E studies that were Type 2s that were taking 4 to 5 years, when if you took out and actually figured out where the Type 2 started, it was much shorter. So we didn't want the false readings continued. So it's one of the reasons why we separated it. But it's like Margie said, the setting up of the project for PD&E, we wanted to document that, and then hopefully that will streamline the PD&E itself.
Okay, I do have a few more questions.
Can I just add the dashboard, and that's the reason for adding the Type 2 CE start. The dashboard will use the Type 2 CE start and then your location design concept acceptance date. The pre-PD&E activities are to help you schedule these things. The dashboard, when you're reporting how long it's taking to do, for example, a Type 2 CE, it will be using the Type 2 start and the location design concept acceptance date. It will not be using the pre-PD&E activities.
That's right. It'll be outside of it.
Yes.
What if a study is added to current fiscal year by management without adequate time to pre-study activity, to do the pre-PD&E activities?
No, you would include those activities. Your starting points would be what your starting point actually is. You're not forced to use these templates. You're forced to use the PSM codes themselves. So you set up your schedule based on the reality of your project.
Sure. And based on, I mean, if it's going to be a Type 2, an EA, or an EIS, they're also going to go through a screening anyway, regardless of when they pop up. They'd be qualifying projects. Another question, how many projects, Type 2s and SEERs, are we anticipating each PM to carry?
That's up to the district.
That's a district decision.
We don't make decisions for the district.
Resource allocation.
Right.
And then another one, don't PSU have their own schedule for this? I'm not sure. PSM, does PSM have their own schedule for this? Or?
PSU was
what's PSU?
Professional services.
Professional services.
Okay.
Yeah, I assume that question is relating to advertising and whatnot. One of these codes I know came out of SWOT for the purposes of understanding how we create our schedules, how we create our scopes. So, and actually they don't have that necessarily other than this, possibly the advertisement PSM code.
Any other questions out there? Give it another minute. Okay, so not seeing any other questions. We appreciate your time on this Friday morning. Like I said, we'll get the recording, we'll get the PowerPoint, we'll get the schedule templates as well as the data dictionary available early next week. We'll send out a notice with a link to the information and for folks to be able to review the webinar. Additionally, as an action, we wrote down we'll put together some screen captures in a Primavera environment showing off the schedule as well for how that would be used, make that accessible as well. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.